Okay, Vanessa, let's come back to you then and the Middle East. And of course, we have a so-called ceasefire plan in the offing.
Yes, something that is developing really into what I described recently on X as being a sadistic farce designed really to enable the continuation of the genocide. So this was the BBC News after the most recent so-called ceasefire negotiations in Doha in Qatar. Of course, Hamas had refused to actually send anyone to negotiate because, as they described it, it was a waste of time. And Israel was continuously putting a spanner in the works. So the BBC runs with the headline, Israel accepts the bridging proposal for the ceasefire deal, says Antony Blinken. And then let's have a look at a few other headlines going from basically May this year until this week. Blinken calls on Hamas to accept ceasefire agreement. They should take it. Blinken says Netanyahu reaffirmed commitment to Gaza ceasefire plan. Blinken says Israel agrees to a US-backed proposal for a ceasefire. Is anyone noticing the pattern here that it's Blinken that's constantly saying that Israel is accepting? And this is Alon Mizrahi on X. Did you notice this pattern where Blinken always announces on Netanyahu's behalf that Netanyahu agreed to the deal, but Netanyahu never says so himself? Did you notice how this time around, as in previous fake negotiations, Netanyahu never goes on record to say that he agreed to any deal? You know why this is. It's because Blinken is committed to Netanyahu's political standing among Jewish right-wingers, and agreeing to any deal would make Netanyahu look weak to them. So at the service of Netanyahu's image and the genocide, Blinken just bluffs with offers specifically tailored to be unacceptable to Hamas, and lies that Netanyahu accepted them, knowing full well that Netanyahu will never have to live up to any deal, because Blinken makes sure that no deal will happen, while making sure the lie of Hamas inflexibility will become the official narrative. And of course, that's exactly what has happened. And in the last few days, Hamas again has accused the US of buying time for Israel to continue its genocide. And if we just move on, so Netanyahu this time around again added new conditions to the ceasefire proposal. So again, he changed the actual proposal, remembering that Hamas had accepted the Blinken broker deal back in July and before that in May. So let's have a look at why Hamas rejects Israel's new conditions in Doha. As it says in the article, basically Netanyahu's new conditions put forward during talks in Doha, and again, Hamas were not present in Doha. Israel's new conditions include keeping troops inside Gaza along its border with Egypt. An informed source said that's now being confirmed, while Hamas demands a complete ceasefire, a complete withdrawal from the Strip, a normal return of the displaced, and a prisoner exchange deal without restrictions, because Netanyahu now has demanded veto rights for up to 100 of the prisoners to be exchanged. So in other words, Palestinian prisoners to be exchanged and returned to the Israeli hostages. Netanyahu is demanding the right to veto up to 100 of those prisoners. So then just moving on. So this is from Mouin Rabban again on X. So he goes through it. You can freeze frame and read it yourself. But basically, he says the same thing. The US presents an Israeli ceasefire, pushes it through the UN Security Council. And then, contrary back in July to US and Israeli expectations, Hamas accepts the initiative. Israel responds by rejecting, adding new conditions to its own initiative designed to be rejected by Hamas. Under the guise of presenting a bridging proposal that would address the implementation of the original initiative, the US rewrites the initiative to incorporate the Israeli conditions presented after the UN Security Council endorsed and Hamas accepted the initiative. Hamas predictably rejects the new US document on the grounds that it's a different initiative, rather than a plan to implement the initiative it accepted. Amid much fanfare and lavish praise showered by Antony Blinken, Netanyahu accepts the revised initiative and then adds more changes to the initiative. So I think you can freeze frame and read it for yourself. but it becomes very clear that this is nothing more than a farce and a very sadistic one. And I just want to show Blinken, in part of his press conference, the area where he talks about the importance of the ceasefire.
Is this: with every passing day that there's not an agreement, two things can happen. One is, of course, more hostages can perish, and second, intervening events come along that may make things even more difficult, if not impossible, and we've experienced that throughout this process. So there's the fierce urgency of now. That's what I think we're all feeling, and we do see this as the best opportunity to finally get this over the finish line. We'll never give up on it, but the challenge is, the longer this goes on, the more, again, hostages will suffer and possibly perish, and the more other things happen that could make things impossible. So that's why we're so intensely focused on getting this done and getting it done now.
Quite extraordinary. There is absolutely no mention of the continuing genocide and slaughter of Palestinians in that statement. And in fact, since Blinken's visit, this is what always happens. Israel has actually escalated yet again, attacking Lebanon's Bekaa, which is in the northeast, nowhere near the southern areas which have been targeted. They attack Bekaa, wounding 5 children under the age of 8 and killing 1. And multiple massacres since Blinken's visit in Gaza itself, including the wounding of 1 Palestinian journalist and the killing of another, taking the number of murdered journalists up to around 170 now. And a video I'm just going to show in Khan Yunis of how the quadcopters are used to randomly fire on civilians. This is in a crowded refugee area. And this is happening on an almost hourly basis. Israeli jets hit another Gaza school, killing at least 12. That number is now rising to around 20. And I just wanted to show these 2 maps side by side, which were produced by the UN Satellite Center, and I think it was back in July. And on the left, you can see the bombardment of residential areas of Gaza. I mean, virtually all of Gaza has pretty much been destroyed now. Of course, there is intensity in the north and in central Gaza and in the far south, which, if you remember, was supposed to be the safe zone for people to flee to from the north. And on the right, that combines the damage to residential areas and the destruction of agricultural, water, reservoirs, everything that is necessary for the maintenance of life in Gaza. So pretty sobering mapping there of the devastation in Gaza, which was not mentioned by Blinken in his rhetoric about a ceasefire.
Okay, Vanessa, thank you for that. Now, let's